Well, my guest today is James Barry, who has been a private chef for some of the biggest names in Hollywood and founded Healthy LA. Well, he founded a healthy LA based meal delivery company called Wholesome2GO. He's authored many cookbooks, including the one that resulted in meeting his wife, Margaret Floyd Barry. And in 2020, he founded Castle Hill Foods and launched Pluck, an Oregon based seasoning. Welcome, James.
Thank you for having me, Carrie. I'm excited to talk and support and provide value to your audience. This is fun.
Yeah, super fun. I'm a big fan of personal stories. And like I said to you before we started here, I was looking up, your profile online and what I could find out about you. And I had this scene come to my mind, in movies. Like sometimes I just think of a movie scene. And it's that scene from Alice in Wonderland with a caterpillar. I don't know if you remember, but there's this caterpillar that says, "Who are you?" So, as a very broad question to start, maybe you could answer for the audience, who is James Barry?
Well, I am a professed picky eater from the past. So, someone who grew up loving cooking from an early age, but didn't see it as a career. And I was also extremely picky eater. Didn't have my first taco till I was in college, who eventually realized that I had my own struggles with food and um, through kind of not eating, working a lot, and not eating to then binging because I was so hungry, that kind of stuff. So I had my own kind of food issues come up when I was in my 20s. I had a kidney stone, which was a health episode that really made me aware that what I ate affected my health. I did not know that in my 20s. This is
Right.
my early 20s. Most people, don't always know that. So that was a huge lesson of extreme pain and never wanting that pain again. So immediately kicking into like, well, what do I do to not experience that kind of pain? Which then got me into thinking about health and what I ate. And then that kicked me into trying all these different things. And how does this affect me? How did that affect me? Detoxing, whenever it was, to then realizing, wait a second, I want to help people with this. I'm getting so much value out of putting an emphasis on what I ate and how it affected my health that I was like, I want to support other people, to then going to culinary school, to then getting to cook for people like Tom Cruise and George Clooney and Barbara Streisand, just some amazing names and experiences, to then becoming a father and realizing, oh, it's not just about me. I want to get the best foods in my daughters and not wanting to deal with picky eating myself. Now, even though I was a picky eater growing up, I don't want to deal with it as a parent. And
Yeah.
so wanting to solve that. Um, and now I would say my who I am and what my mission is to truly help people get whole animal nose to tail into their diets easily and deliciously.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think anyone who's at this level of interest in nutrition, in connection to health, as we are, it is had some kind of a health journey, whether it's their own or with someone they love. And so, just curious, what kind of, when people focus on nutrition, or when you've seen people really focus in on eating the right way, for to support health, what kind of results have you witnessed?
Well, I would say that one of the big things I've noticed in my 20-year career in the health field as a chef is is that people don't make changes easily. And they really, honestly, I rarely see anyone make changes unless or until someone they know gets sick or dies,
Mm.
or they themselves get sick. And I find that really discouraging, and it upsets me that uh, that we are so comfortable and not wanting to leave that comfort zone that we have to wait until an extreme, or until what like what a lot of health practitioners call, until there's a fire. You know,
Right.
we don't look for smoke, we wait for the fire.
Yeah.
And so what I have spent a lot of my career doing is really trying to support people and realizing, well, hey, skin issues, hair issues, even like cloudy, where you look at someone, the whites of their eyes and they're bloodshot, they don't look clear.
Mhm.
Um, breathing issues, of course, anxiety, sleeping. Um, I mean, any of these kind of chronic, pesky, low grade illnesses that people or health issues that people experience on a daily basis and they think it's normal. I mean, even flatulence, right? Growing up, like I thought that was normal. I thought excessive flatulence, I thought undoing the button of your pants after a meal was all normal. And if anything, that's really the culmination of what I've learned is that you only know what you know. And
Right.
so in a sense, I'm trying to more and more focus on providing contrast for people because you don't know anything until you have that contrast, or that awareness is another word for it, right? And so I find myself constantly just trying to do that. But here's the tough lesson I learned right out of culinary school is I was so excited about all the stuff I was learning around health and nutrition. And I went to a party. I went to culinary school in New York, and I was at this party and I was like talking to people. I'm like, oh, did you know this about the cow industry or the poultry industry and how they raise these animals and how like they do this, they do that, and it's so horrible. And I was just devastating people with all this information that they did not ask for.
Right, I can relate
At,
to that.
like at all. They didn't ask for it. They just were at a party and got in. Hey, what do you do? What are you into? It was just a casual conversation. And I took it to a whole other level of like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm into. And they were like, their jaws just, were gaping, and they were like, so you just killed it for me to eat anything. So now what do I do? And I was like, I actually don't know what to do because I was so green, right? I was so
Right.
just fresh out of, I was still in culinary school. So I was like, I don't have any answers. I just can recognize the problems. and and they were like, well, I don't want to talk to you anymore because you just killed it for me. And I was like, oh, okay. So I
Yeah.
learned very quickly that you don't give people these answers. You don't kind of push this information on people until they're ready to ask it for it. That it really is about meeting people where they are versus trying to push them
So
to what
true.
I believe is right. Because what I believe is right doesn't necessarily apply to everyone.
Yeah, yeah, it makes me think, where when I go somewhere and I don't eat something, and then people be like, "Why aren't you eating that?" Whether it's, wheat or dairy, conventional dairy, or and I'll say, "Well, do you want me to ruin it for you?" And usually they're like, "No, never mind, just forget it."
Well, here's a topic though. I see this is the big contradiction for me. So here's the thing. I absolutely believe that there's all these issues. I believe that we need to be mindful and we got to kind of dot our I's, cross our T's around food, look for food that is, that is an ingredient versus has ingredients, things like that. So I do advocate that. I believe in that. I strive towards that. And I also fear that we are getting way too granular and stressed out about all the little details
Yeah.
to the point where I think people are causing so much anxiety in themselves where they're worrying, is the food organic? Is it 100% grass fed? Is it this? Is it that? Did the animal eat GMOs? Was it vaccinated? Was it this or that? And it's like, they're so stressed. And I am now learning in this, the age I'm at now, I'm like, holy moly. So if you're going to tier things, should we be focused on eating organic? Or should we be focused on like lowering our stress when we are eating whatever it is we're eating?
Very good
Be-
point, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like that stress level can dictate. You could be eating the best food in the world, but if you're stressed out or in that kind of fight or flight, you know, nervous system stage, you're not going to digest or absorb that food very well at all. And it could be the cleanest food in the world. It won't matter. So to
Yeah.
me, that stress level and the state you're in, the mindfulness you're in when you eat that food it kind of trumps everything for me now.
I think you're right. I'm kind of feeling that myself because I do pay a lot of attention to what I eat and I look for quality ingredients and this and that. I don't say I have like food anxiety or anything like that. It's just a choice. I prefer to eat this way. I know it makes me feel the best. And if I'm somewhere where it doesn't have that, I will eat if outside of it, but I've had too many sort of food reactions that I know my body that I have to have it. But I think that you're spot on with talking about the stress of it all because what we don't want to do when we're changing habits and trying to have a healthier life is wind ourselves up so tight that we, like you said, can't relax. That nervous system regulation is so important to digestion, to overall health, everything.
And you can't underestimate joy. Like joy is the secret sauce. There, I mean, think about placebo effect, right? It's like placebo effect is a real thing. It's they do these experiments. They give the person a placebo, meaning that they don't have the actual thing that they're testing. They have water or whatever. It's just a neutral nothing to
Mm-hmm.
test against their outcome, their desired outcome, and the people still see results. So that is power of mind. That's the power of positive thinking. It's like you can't underestimate that. And I think if anything, when we have these discussions around health, that it's not about throwing the baby out with the bath. It's not about saying, okay, well, these other things don't matter. They do matter. But I also think we need to include what is your energy around these topics? What is the actual desired outcome that you want? And how mindful are you being and intentional are you being when you are making these choices, but not about the intention of being stressed out and like, does it fit into the box that I've created, but more about, I want the outcome I want is I want to thrive. I want to be filled with joy as I eat this food. I want
Right.
to enjoy the company I'm in and I want to be grateful for everything I have. That's a very different intention than like, is this food organic? Is it been grass fed 100%? Does it have any fat? Does it have this or it's like I'm just focusing on completely different things.
Right. Yeah. The nourishment of it. I have a new phrase that I like. It's nourished feels different than full. Like when you eat something that you know is healthy and satiating, and versus when you eat other foods that just make you feel stuffed, or like you mentioned, like with your especially Thanksgiving's coming up as we're recording this, and you're thinking about the belt buckles that will be undone after that meal, and really not the ancestral way.
No, exactly. I mean, if you okay, like that's great. Like think about holidays. So we know when we go into the holiday, there's a lot of emotions. So we know that the best thing we can do is to not try to pretend that we don't have trauma and to pretend that we're not going into that situation where we're going to potentially feed our emotions,
Mm,
and that we can actually maybe set the intention of not only how we're going to be in that environment but how we want that environment to serve us, so I think that if I go into Thanksgiving and I'm always telling people, like, even before you go to start eating the meal, like, take a breath, do a prayer, say something grateful. I mean, anything to just get you to just pull back for a second instead of just diving in. And once you can pull back and take that breath, then maybe the next step is a little bit more mindful. And then maybe you're simply doing things like you're putting your fork, your spoon, your knife down in between bites. Very simple things.
yeah, that gratitude practice has a lot more to do with your physiology than you might think. It's actually going to help your body with digestion, like you said.
And if you just slow down too, like if let's say all this is too overwhelming for someone listening, they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do first. Like, okay, so just go into Thanksgiving and promise that you're going to do everything slowly. You're going to listen more than you talk. You're going to take breaks in between every bite and make sure that the food you're eating is chewed before you start with the next bite. Like just doing that. And then maybe the second thing is you're going to go for a walk after you eat. And I'm not talking after you eat dessert. I'm saying after you eat your first course or whatever it is you're eating. You know what I mean? Like just go take a
Hmm.
walk, 15 minutes, brief, but like
Slow it
change the
down.
environment for a second. so that you can really continue to be very mindful and of where you are as, emotionally, but then also where your body is physically in terms of, is it full? Is it not full? Like, just give yourself that gap.
Right. Yeah, so true. We met at the Wise Traditions conference, and so I know that we have that in common. Where, because I think you're on a mission to simplify things too, to simplify things to make it healthier, to simplify the access to having organ meats in your diet with Pluck. And I also too like have noticed that there's so much confusion around what to eat, how to eat. I have people asking me a lot, should I eat this? Is this good? Is that good? And I say, well, this confusion is by design. So how can you keep it simple? We're talking about some of those tips on how to keep it simple. Um, how do you, what's a good tip that you would have other than what we said, I suppose already, about keeping it simple when it comes to eating quote unquote healthy?
Yeah, I think first of all, people get, well, there's a few kind of places we can come from. So one might be that we come at it from your own expectations around what is healthy, your own definition of what is healthy. I mean, that's one thing. I think that statement I made about looking for ingredients that are ingredients, or sorry, food that is an ingredient versus has ingredients, that doesn't mean ingredients are bad. It just means that we want to focus on things that are an ingredient. I think the more we can do that, the better. Um, but ultimately, I like to think of it like, okay, first of all, if cooking stresses you out, like, it's okay. So take a breath. Just know that just because we eat doesn't mean we have to love cooking. That said, it also is very hard to be healthy if you're eating out all the time. So the focus wants to be on, let's cook from our home. But how do we do that? How do we make that so it's enjoyable? Well, make the environment fit the desired outcome. So let's say if cooking stresses you out, then create an environment that is not stressful. So maybe put on your favorite podcast, your favorite music, wear your favorite comfortable clothes as you cook. Maybe be having a drink or whatever makes you relaxed and joyful. Maybe could be simply like sparkling water with lime. Like, that actually makes me joyful when I have that. Like, I like that. The bubbles hitting my mouth kind of create some joy. So it's like, it doesn't have to be alcoholic. It could be whatever really makes you relaxed and joyful. And then, like, just instead of feeling stressed by following a recipe, follow a formula. Well, what's the formula? Well, we all need some kind of protein. I focus on animal protein, but whatever you focus on, you need some protein. We're more and more finding that as you age, it's better to increase your protein rather than decrease it. So focus on that protein being the biggest part of your meal. Do you need a carbohydrate? Do you need like starches? Not, that depends on what you believe, right? So we don't need to necessarily focus on that. So the next thing I would say is focus on fat. Like, what is the fat you're using? And a lot of times I let the fat and the protein kind of go hand in hand. So and it's like, if my desired outcome is like, okay, I want to have something like more Asian flavor,
Yeah.
tasty, right? Then I'm combining those based on that outcome. So usually, if I want something more Asian-y, specifically like Thai or Japanese or even Chinese, I would use like coconut oils. I would use sesame oils, things like that. Whereas
Coconut
if I'm
aminos.
yeah, coconut. Well, yeah, coconut aminos would be that wouldn't necessarily be what I cook with it though,
Oh,
because that
sure.
would burn, right?
Right.
But that would be a flavor additive, so absolutely. Um, but if I was doing like Indian Asian, I would do ghee, and if I was doing more American, I would do American fare. I would do tallow, lard, ghee still. Butter, I'm not going to cook with because it's going to burn, but I could add that later on. Like, particularly if you're making any meats, it's really lovely to make a compounded butter where you're just taking room temperature butter, you're mixing it with different seasonings. I love using Pluck with that,
Yum.
making Pluck butter basically, and then you then put it back, you shape it, put it into the refrigerator, it solidifies, and now you can just cut a little dab of seasoned butter onto your steak or whatever it is you're eating, and it just flavors the whole thing and gives it a nice rich fat, and it's just so good. Um, but
So delicious.
yeah, so I just focus on those kind of things like simplifying. So, and then formula wise, maybe if you're doing vegetables, then you want to have a good amount of vegetables for the for to like. There's actually some belief that you should eat your vegetables first. If you're someone who eats vegetables, that you should actually eat them first, because if you eat them first, not only is it going to support digestion because the meat takes longer to digest, but it's depending on what you're eating vegetable wise. Um, but but also it's the fiber is going to fill you up, and it's actually going to support your blood glucose levels. Like, so it's going to slow down. Let's just say if you're drinking soda while you're eating or something like that, that it's going to slow down any sugar rushes because you already have so much fiber. So there's
Mm,
some belief that that's why when you look at different meals and how they'll have courses, like notice how the salad course is before the main course, that kind of thing.
okay.
So soups, salads, anything that's going to have like a lot of fiber in them, vegetables. That's kind of an interesting idea. And I'd heard about that when I was in culinary school, but I hadn't really like thought about it in a long time. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to kind of think about that again.
Well,
About
now that you're talking about all the fats and the things like that, it's a, I was going to ask you because I think our American diet, especially like we're talking standard American diet, but even if people are trying to eat healthy, whatever that means in America, I think that even still, it's hard that so much of the flavors that are sweet. We're used to the sweet palate, and talk about umami and all, as a chef bringing out all these different flavors and how important that is really for our overall health. So could you kind of explain a little bit about umami, what that is, why we need that?
Yeah, I mean, so well, we started with picky eating, right? I mentioned I was a picky eater, and really picky eating is, of course, there's emotional things about it, but it's really a palate is my kind of in for picky eating. And if you think about it, as you mentioned, so in the standard American diet or in America, we are skewed towards salty sweet. So we have the taste buds. We have sweet, sour, bitter. Sorry, so salty, sweet, bitter, sour, and then umami is the fifth one, which they discovered in the 90s in Japan. Umami is sort of like savory, meaty. It's umami can be in tomatoes, it's in mushrooms, it's in organ meats, it's in beef, it's in lots of things. It's just in organ meats, it's extremely um, concentrated. And so, particularly when it's a freeze dried organ meat like we use in Pluck. But so I'm always looking for, okay, if our picky eaters are skewed towards salty sweet, how do we introduce those other flavors? Because that's really how you're going to help support them to getting, kind of recalibrating their palate.
Mm.
You can't like, you can't just will someone to try something different. Like it's going to taste off. Like if you're someone that only drinks sodas, water is always going to taste weird. It's always
Right.
going to taste plain. You can't just will yourself to think differently on it. Your palate will inform you, hey, this is plain, because it's so blown out with the sweetness and the flavors you're getting from the soda, right? So
Mm.
you have to address it physically as well. And how I recommend people doing that is just treating it no differently than you would a pet who you're transitioning to a new diet. You never go all in with that pet. You do 95 of the old one or the current food to 5% of the new food. And you slowly ease that ratio until they're doing 95 of the new food and 5% of the old food. And you're doing that for their digestive process when you're doing it for a pet. But for humans, you're really, because you're giving the palate time to adjust. Now, how quickly can the palate adjust? Well, if you, depending on how you do it, like if you do like an elimination diet where you fully go cold turkey and pull all these sweets and all these things out of your diet, you can recalibrate your palate in 2 weeks. It's
Right. Like
incredible.
like with the restart program I used to
Yeah.
teach.
Totally. Restart
Yeah.
programs. Yep. We used to have one called the sugar control detox, and it's like 2 weeks. It took like, so what we would do in those 2 weeks is we would start it out where um, they they had to cut out alcohol. They had to cut out anything with sugar, anything that was overly sweet. So the only fruit that they could have, literally the only fruit was raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries. They couldn't even have strawberries; those were too sweet. So anything
Mm.
that was overly sweet pulled out. We pulled out all starches, like potatoes, anything, white starches, pastas, any grains we pulled out.
Yeah.
So basically, what was left was protein, meat protein, usually, because you didn't want to even give them like beans or which if they were doing tofu, that's soybean. You didn't want to give that either because it's too high in carbohydrates, right?
Yeah.
So you wanted stuff that was high in protein. You had fat, and then you had some vegetables, some resistant starches like cauliflower. You could give them sweet potato or butternut squash, those kind of things. And then you could do certain resistant starches like parsnips or rutabaga or anything like that you could do. But you just wanted to keep away from those simple carbs or those
Yeah.
things that converted really quickly in your
And it really
bloodstream.
does, like you said, to reemphasize that, it really does reset your palate. I remember with our experience, we'd have people try a green apple at the beginning of the 2 weeks and then a green apple at the end. And you wrote down what it tasted like in both instances. And of course, the first time they tasted, it's like very sour. And the second time it's like, wow, you can really taste the sweetness because you've reset your palate.
Oh yeah, people who started out, they were drinking 3 glasses of wine a night. They could barely finish a half a glass by the end. Like
Oh,
so, but by the time their palate had recalibrated, they would introduce wine back in, and they couldn't finish a whole glass because it was too sweet. Same thing with sweets in general. Like if they went to try to have a dessert, a structured dessert, they would be like, "Oh, it's too sweet." And they would eat a strawberry and they would have just one and be like, "Okay, I'm done." Like that was plenty sweet. So it really like brought out the true flavors
yeah.
of food. And
Yeah.
and you start to see like the only reason ice cream, for example, doesn't taste sweet is because it's cold. If it was warm, you would be able to taste how sweet it is, like how much sugar is in it. Same thing, anyone listening who's ever had a warm soda knows exactly what I'm talking about. A cold
Oh,
soda doesn't taste that sweet. A warm soda, you really taste like, oh, this is like this is insanely sweet. You know?
interesting. I never thought about that. Wow.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. That's a good
temperature affects things incredibly, but yeah, our palates are. You have to assume if you're living in American society that your palate is messed up. That is not accurate. You're not accurately tasting food for what it is.
right.
And even like chefs, I find this very fascinating. So if you're adrenal fatigued, someone who has that issue, you crave salt. And so that's to anyone listening who's like excessively, obsessed around salt, you may have adrenal fatigue. So you might want to get checked.
Mhm.
Um, but so anyone that has that issue, well, most chefs have adrenal fatigue because of their lifestyle. And yet
Hours.
they're the ones making your food and salting your food. So I always find it interesting. It's like, how are they balancing that when their palate is so messed up?
That's a good point. A good point. So obviously you can get umami flavor in your palate by using Pluck. And before we talk about Pluck, I definitely have lots of questions about it. But I know you're a parent, and I have friends that are parents that have just told me, I just don't like to cook. And I'm thinking, well, it's kind of a necessity was, not only for yourself, but especially if you have kids. So how could you simplify cooking, finding some joy in cooking, especially if you want to support the health of your kids?
Yeah. Well, so if we just focus on kids, I find including them in the whole process really helps. So one very underutilized health tool is meal planning. It's incredibly helpful, and it really does move the needle the most out of the kitchen kind of tools or skills I could give someone is just meal plan. Because think about where are the kind of points in the process that kind of kick you off the wagon, right? It's, oh well, when I make emotional purchases at the grocery store. So you're buying things that are not good for you. You're
Right.
buying things that are desserts or sweets because you're like, oh, it's a Friday, let's just bring this into the house. But right away, I'm a big believer of If it's in the house, I'm going to eat it. So I know how I am.
Me
And
too.
so, right? It doesn't matter. Like, I'll make every excuse. It may not even be something I like, but if I am in a place where I'm like, oh, I'm craving something, then I'll even eat the thing I don't like. So
Yeah.
I'm just a huge fan of, like, if you don't believe it's healthy, or you don't believe it's something you want to encourage in your family's diets, do not bring it in the house. Make it something you guys have to work to get. That would be one thing. Meal planning supports that, because when you find recipes and you can do it as a family or with your kids, like, hey, what looks good? Let's pick this week's cookbook. Let's pick from that. And you let them contribute to the meal plan. And when they contribute to it, they don't know what it's going to taste like. They're looking at photos and like, oh, you're already piquing this curiosity, and you're letting not their brain dictate it, but more their impulse dictate it when you're looking at a cookbook, because they don't
Mhm.
know what it's going to taste like necessarily, right? So they're just basing it off of, oh, that looks good, or that looks good. So it's very instinctual. And
Yeah.
then you start building your ingredient list from the recipes you chose. And then now you're going to the grocery store and you're only buying what you're going to put in those recipes.
Have
So
a
there's
special trip.
no emotional purchases, and you're bringing your kids with you. Like, so let's just say there's a bell pepper in there and the recipe didn't specify what color. Well, guess what? You guys get to decide as a family, or you let your kids, like, hey, let's touch them. Let's look at what color do you think would go well with this meal. And you just include them in that process. And it's so cool, because one thing I would do with my kids from a very young age is that when I brought them home and we started to make the recipe, not only was I, as I mentioned, including them in that process, but I was letting them taste the food raw. I'm like, okay, now let's cook it and let's see how it changed. Okay, now it's the finished product. What is it like? Let's blend it. What happens when we blend it? I would take them through the process from, you're cutting it to you've cooked it and it's a plated meal, and breaking it up into stages so that they could really experience every stage. And it's fascinating when you do that, because you demystify, you deconstruct the pickiness. You sort of, it's no longer this kind of like thing that they have to control. And it's more like, oh, this thing is not going to hurt me. It doesn't have control over me. I have control over it.
It was
Like,
kind of like, yeah, you're giving them ownership.
yes, very
Mhm.
much so. Agency around it. And it's like, it's so cool to watch and experience, to the point now where my kids, like, they want to cook. So I inadvertently made cooking enjoyable for them. I didn't set out to do that. I was just setting out to teach them how to take care of themselves,
Yeah.
how to, like, choose food that makes their bodies feel good. And what's really hard as a parent, and I'm sure everyone listening who is one identifies with this, is like, you only have so much control. Like, really the only control we have over what our kids eat is when they are at our home.
True.
Thereafter, when they leave the home, you have zero control. And so that's why it's even more important to have intention in the home, to really only bring in what you want to feed your kid. Because what we're doing in the big picture of it is, we're not just teaching them what today's meal is. We're teaching them, what does your body feel like? What does it feel like in your body when you eat this way? Because you're creating a ground zero. Like, you're creating a place for them to know that when they go out in the world and they eat whatever they eat and they don't feel good in their body, they know the difference. We're creating contrast.
Yeah. And it makes me think of this video I saw online, probably somewhere, of how a mom was sharing how she's, a mom that's involved in nutrition, of course, and she's sharing that her daughter went to a friend's house and was saying, oh, no, no, thank you. I don't eat that, whatever it was, and just that her daughter had been informed in her own body, in her own agency of, I don't want to eat that. It's my choice. So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting, because it gets empowering them, because if you're informing them by cooking with them now, and then later, like you say, when they're on their own, that will inform their choices and, yeah, shape their palate.
Yeah, well, and there is deeper stuff than we're kind of talking about it in a very layman's terms way, but there is deeper, like, the bacteria in your gut is going to inform your cravings, right? And what you're feeding your kid at home and what you're trying to establish from, pre in utero to let's say before they actually start, well, really until they're out of your home. So let's just say 18, 20, whatever, is you're trying to basically support that gut culture. And if they do get any kind of I don't know, yeast overgrowth, bacteria overgrowth, or anything like that, that's also going to inform the cravings, right? It's going to affect their choices. So what we're trying to do is really create an internal environment that gives them a place to go back to, a knowledge base to go back to, and hopefully nurture an environment that's going to kind of be as optimally healthy as possible. Because the reality is the minute they start eating standard American diet, or an overabundance of sugar, or an overabundance of simple carbs, starches or something like that, their body bacterial, gut bacteria is going to get offset. It's going to get compromised.
And then they're going to have a health problem, a behavioral problem, a
It's a,
brain problem.
yeah, it's a guarantee. It's literally almost a guarantee. I mean, and we're seeing it. Our kids are the canary in the coal mine. We're seeing this play out now. Most people have these issues. They just don't know it. They don't have a name for it. They're not aware that these chronic issues that they have are stemming from these things. They
Yeah.
don't know that, oh, you mean I don't we don't all just naturally have bad breath? Like, you mean that breath can actually be naturally not bad? Like, that the actual norm is to have good breath, and you don't need to have good breath because you're having peppermint. It's because of your gut bacteria and what's going on internally. You're eating foods that are not supporting an overabundance of candida or an overabundance of something else that's causing the bad breath. So there's so many things. There's so many things that we just don't know. And I guess I'm here to say, like just assume that you probably have something going on, and start asking for help, because no one expects you to do it alone. And no one, I personally would hate it for you just to go online and start doing searches and thinking that you have to self-diagnose, because I guarantee if you do that, you are going to spin your wheels for so much more, like, longer, and you're going to spend so much more money doing that than if you just went to a practitioner who was good
Yeah.
at what they did, and they worked with you for 3 to 6 months and eradicated whatever is going on and identified whatever is going on.
So true. It kind of makes me think about, I just, you go on Facebook and you're scrolling and you see these different comments people make. Like, I'm in some local groups, like different cities have local chat groups in Facebook. So I'm seeing local people that I don't know necessarily comment on things. And someone had said, oh, I have a problem. I forget even what the problem exactly was. That's not the point. The point is that the advice that everyone was giving was, oh, you better go to urgent care. You better go to urgent care. And I thought, that's kind of why I was looking to see what are people telling this person to do. And I'm thinking, oh, well, I don't know if that's really going to help you in this situation. And I know I've heard you speak on this, as far as, being your own, like, health advocate, or having like a functional nutritionist that you work with, because that can help resolve so many of these common problems people face all the time, these reoccurring things that they're getting or their kids are getting, and they run to the doctor and just end up getting a medication that only suppresses the problem. Do you think, like, in the context of where we are now, we're like late 2024 and there's lots of talk about health. Do you think that we're on the cusp of change with that, where people will really the masses will start to realize they need to seek out a nutritional, expert to work with as their first line of defense?
Well, I think we're already exiting a period where people thought their doctor had all the answers. I don't think we're fully out of that, but I know that my parents' generation was absolutely, they looked to their doctor for every answer. And I think that we're starting to learn that, doctors, they are very helpful. I'm not undermining the Western medicine at all, but they don't know nutrition. Most of
Right.
them do not. They're not taught it. It's not an emphasis. So it's not, I'm not blaming them. This system is not set up for it. So they are now that we have these distinctions of like, well, nutrition and surgery and, you know, the specialists of what people do, I think we're now starting to getting a clue of like, oh, well, you don't go to your doctor for that. It still, some people do, but I think we're getting closer to that place. But in terms of, you know, are we going to see as much change as we need in the next, you know, whether it's 4 years or whatever, moving forward? I don't anticipate we will. I think it takes longer. I mean, as we started this out, we said like, well, what does it take for someone to shift their diet? Well, it takes them getting sick or someone dying. So that's
Mm,
extreme. So
yeah.
that's not a 4 year, that's not a 4 year process. But what I think we are going to do is just start introducing contrast. And honestly, that's all I want. I just want people to be aware that if you have any illness going on, chronic kind of
Symptoms. Yeah.
symptoms, whatever it is, that it's not normal, that is not your normal, and to
Right.
start asking questions. I think the best thing any of us can do right now is to assume, to not think that we have all the answers. And I promise you, even though I'm a guest talking about this stuff, I do not pretend I know what is right for you. And I am constantly challenging the things that I believe and trying new things. Because
Yeah.
here's the best person to trust through all this. If you don't want to trust me, if you don't trust Carrie, whatever, this is the person to trust. And it's the person who's always with you, is never going to lie to you, and will always inform you of what is working or not working. And that is your body.
Hmm.
If you are eating a diet that your body does not like, it will tell you. So all I want us to, every one of us to do is just to listen more. So
Yeah.
are you, you know, I mentioned earlier, do you fart, like, is it constant flatulence, or even just like, what is constant? Well, I'm not, it doesn't have to be every day, but is it a lot? Like
Yeah. Or reflux or these things
reflux,
that people
acid
just
reflux
suppress.
when you lay down. Exactly. Do you still struggle every night to go to sleep? Are you, are you noticing that you have like, you can't stop eating all day, you know, that you just keep getting these huge like cravings all day, and then when you eat something you're crashing and you want to sleep? Like, are you finding these kind of things? Like, these are all indications. Is your skin, is your skin bad? Like, is it not clear? Is your hair thinning? These are all indications that what you're doing diet wise is not working. and
Yes.
and so
Yes.
just listen to your body. Are you bloated a lot? Like, I mean, that's what I always tell people. Like, you need to have the dignity of your diet, whatever you believe. Like, if you're vegetarian, vegan, great. But if you're feeling bloated and always hungry and having those crashes, that's telling you it's not working.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more on and listening to your body and those symptoms. And we're kind of just in a culture of people feeling as though the answer is to suppress, and it's really not. It's to tune in more and figure it out and get to the root cause. Now,
It,
you mentioned vegans and vegetarians. I was going to ask you that. And if, before I go there, though, how do you end up coming up with a thing like Pluck? I mean, how do you get directed to like, hey, we all need more organ meats in our diet? Where did that idea spark from?
and sometimes it feels divine, because it's like, in today's day and age, to have a new food that no one else has done, has never combined, and it's not laboratory made. I'm just taking real foods and I'm combining them in a way that no one else did before I did. Um, I'm constantly amazed that I was the first to do that, and I'm very grateful that I listened. And I have, an amazing wife who supported me on this journey of like, no, do this, and helping to guide me on which path to take. Um, but ultimately it came from being a father. My kids at a very young age, during a trip to Canada, they got Shiga toxin, which is a form of E. coli, and it's
Mm.
It's basically can be deadly for young kids and the elderly. And
Wow.
you can't give when someone gets E. coli, you cannot give them antibiotics. You could actually make it worse. So it's not bacterial. And so it's really like, in many ways, you almost have to just let it play out.
Hmm.
And if the person's robust, it plays out and they move and, and then they can start to, it's almost like think of it like an extended period of having food illness,
Terrible for
right?
kids.
You can't
Wow.
keep anything in, everything's going out, everything. Well, my oldest got through it in like 3 days. My youngest, it just wouldn't leave. And she was already very thin. And it was like, I had to go out of town, I think around day 7 or 8. And I thought she was on the rebound. So I think I left the night before and she had tried something, or maybe that morning she had tried something. And I thought, okay, she can now hold something in. But then I'm on my trip. My wife calls, no, she couldn't hold it in. It's gone. And so I came back just a few days later and she was skin and bones. And it was so scary as a parent to watch my daughter withering away. And it was in that moment that I felt very aware of like, okay, how can I get nutrition into her, but not have it be like, have a barrier to it, so at one point it finally started to lift and she was able to eat something and she ate toast. And of course, when you're sick for so long and the first food that you eat doesn't make you sick, that food is what you become addicted to. And so
Mm,
here she was, she wouldn't eat anything but toast. And so I was like, well, this isn't going to work because
right.
I don't like, toast is not good on the best day. And so I was like, this isn't, I just didn't feel good. And so I was like, well, what if there was something I could sprinkle on that toast that would make it a little bit more nutritious? And that's where I started to get the idea. But it wasn't until a little later that it was more like, well, what are the most nutrient dense foods? And just doing the research and finding, well, it's organ meats. And even though I'd known that when I went to culinary school at the very beginning, so I'd known that for 15 years at the time, I I still hadn't really been practicing it. I wasn't eating it regularly. I wasn't really doing it for clients. I didn't really value it as much as I do now because now I'm a father and I'm like, I want the most nutrient dense foods that are going to be available. So the biggest bang for our buck. And I want to be able to get those into my kids and I want to do it easily and deliciously.
Mm,
So that's when I then got the idea of like, well, if it's organ meats, then what are the ways we do it? Well, we eat them, but most people think they're gross. They're not eating them.
right.
Um, we don't know how to cook them. We've lost the art of cooking them. And some people don't know how to source them. And then if they do take them, they're in capsules and they're just swollen, but you can't necessarily give capsules to a kid. And the other thing is capsule fatigue is a real thing. It's like whenever I follow a protocol of supplements, I'm really good for the first month, but it starts to kind of fall off, right?
Yeah.
Particularly
Yeah.
once that first bottle or those bottles start to empty, it's like staying on top of it is really challenging. And let alone, is this something you're gonna do forever? It's like, it's just not, I don't know. It's not realistic.
Sustainable. Yeah. Food
Yeah.
first. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when I started to go, well, what here we have these freeze-dried organs. This exists. It's a real food. It's when you take it, it's raw organ meat. You take it, you freeze it just like you would sushi to make sure anything in it is killed. Then you
Mhm.
would basically freeze dry it. The freeze dry and removes the moisture and even slightly heats it a little bit, but it's mostly about the moisture. But it maintains the nutrients because it's a very low heat. And basically, once you have that, you powder them. So there's nothing added to it. It's just a real food, and yet it's self-stable. Like you don't have to refrigerate it. It will last for up to 2 years. You know what I mean?
Mm,
It's like a great high nutrient food that is now self-stable. And then
I
I was
love
like,
it.
well, what other things do we do? When we make a pate, we add onions, we add all these other things, but we have those in dried form. Why can't I just combine these two dried form products and make a shelf-stable product that you don't have to know how to cook with? You just season your food. And so all these pieces started to come together. And then it was like, oh, let me try this on my kids. Let me try this with other people. And so I started having these dinner parties, and I would put the Pluck in the food, not tell anyone. They were all meat eaters, so it wasn't an issue. But
Right.
everyone was like, "This is so amazing. This is so good. What's going on?" And I was like, "Well,
Yeah.
you just ate organs." And they're like, "What?" And so once I started to find that not only were people, particularly kids, getting this response, this physical response of like, oh, I'm getting these nutrients that my body craves and wants. So there's almost an ancestral primal reaction. But
Yeah.
the other thing I was getting, which is what you mentioned earlier, which is the umami. So the umami being the fifth unique taste, it's a unique taste being the key thing, is that it actually brightens the food. It brightens the other flavors. So what happens when you add something like Pluck that's high umami, it actually makes your food taste better.
Mm.
So early on, when I introduced Pluck to people, made it available to sell or buy, people would say, "Oh, I only use Pluck. That was the only thing I did differently in my meal." And that night, my family wanted seconds. I was getting all these compliments on the food, and I didn't even tell them what was in it. But everyone not only loved the food but wanted more of it.
I have to say that I can vouch for that story because I also had, mentioned it in advance to my family saying, "Hey, I got this organ meat shakers and, let's try them." And then putting it on everything then, like putting I think, is it the all-purpose flavor? Is that what it's called,
The
James?
yellow one, yeah, that's all purpose.
Yellow
Oh,
one,
it's
yeah.
it's called original now, but yeah, it's
Original.
basically an all purpose.
I mean, the one I just for everyone listening, like I, urge you to try it because it is, like you say, the most nutrient dense food. I remember being a kid, and it's the one food that my mom tried to force feed me was liver, and she had this little song that she sang, "Are you a liver lover?" And it didn't work, But going through and studying nutrition, and realizing like that the responsible way to be a meat eater is to eat nose to tail. And that's what you're
Yeah.
trying to do here. And could you speak a little bit about why organ meats are so nutrient dense?
Yeah, so in Pluck, we use liver, heart, kidney, spleen, pancreas. And so we kind of dub liver particularly, but I look at all the organs as Mother Nature's multivitamin. So we've learned over the years that cofactors matter. So back in the day, they would give you, for example, like iron, and they just gave you iron alone, laboratory made iron. And then they realized like, oh wait, actually iron doesn't absorb without a cofactor, meaning it has to have something else. So they've only recently learned that. And so what's beautiful about organ meats and the nutrients in it is that it's as Mother Nature intended. So all the cofactors are there, making it so easily absorbed. But just to break it down, so there's 5 organs in Pluck. So liver is rich in vitamin A. It's rich in iron, heme iron. It's got all the B vitamins, include B12, which is also in meat too. But what do these do? Well, liver supports eye health, immune function. It boosts energy, red blood cell production, enhances brain function, and nerve health. Then we have heart. Heart is a great source of CoQ10, which if you've ever had to do any cardiovascular supplements, usually that's what's recommended is something that has CoQ10. So isn't that interesting that the heart, that's also good for your heart, has
Right.
vitamins and minerals that are going to support your heart. That's what we call like supports like. So the liver is going to support your liver, the heart's going to support your heart, and vice versa. So heart is going to also have iron, selenium. Obviously, the heart supports cardiovascular health, cellular energy production. Kidney is packed with B vitamins and selenium and zinc, and it contributes to immune system strength, hormone balance, and enzyme production, detoxification, and antioxidant support. Spleen is actually known for being higher in iron than liver, and it helps with really, really good if you're anemic, obviously, if you have any iron deficiencies. But it also improves oxygen delivery throughout the body. It supports immune function, blood, red blood cell formation. And then the pancreas is the last one we have in Pluck, and that one is really cool. So anyone that's taking like pineapple enzymes because they're getting digestive support, well,
Uh-huh.
the pancreas is rich in enzymes, so it's naturally rich in the enzymes that are going to support digestion and also, of course, essential nutrients. So when you eat Pluck, we actually have already built into it by adding the pancreas digestive support. And of course, nutrient absorption because of it, because you have the digestive, we use the digestive support not for it to leave our body, but so that we better absorb the nutrients. And of course, then it's also good for blood sugar regulation and balance, metabolic health. So everything, not only is it's extremely nutrient dense, it's also bioavailable, and they're all supporting those parts in your body that need supports, like. And our
Right.
hope actually down the road is to even add more. Like, we want to put out a brain product. We want to add lung to our blend because so many people are having they're having
Respiratory. Yeah.
respiratory issues, and so there is that. Like I said, there is an idea that one of the reasons why we're seeing so many of these issues increase is because we're not eating these parts of the animal. And
Interesting.
and I want to actually stress, I have been to slaughterhouses, and it's really true that when we slaughter an animal, we are only using like 50% of the animal. And that is the most inhumane thing about it. Like, people think it's the killing of the animal that's humane. No, it's disrespectful to take a life and only use 50% of it. There's no industry out there that is surviving and doing well, or that you would like, I wouldn't create a business and only use 50% of my resources. Like, that's just
Right.
absurd.
Those slaughterhouses you mentioned are like, it's like the CAFOs, the conventional farming, not the
No, that
regenerative.
it has nothing to do with. So, slaughterhouse is separate from how the animal's raised. This is just where they process the meat, or where
Oh,
they
which
kill
has
the
been
animal.
so super consolidated. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and there's not a lot of
Right.
meat processors in the U.S. And so when they're not set up to use the whole animal. Many of them, and what's happening is, you think that they're going into other industry, and sometimes they do. Sometimes they go to pet industry. But I was at one in Wyoming, and they told me, they said, nope, we just throw it away,
Oh,
50% of it.
that is heartbreaking. It really is. It's just like terrible waste. It's got to be. It's sinful, really. That kind of a thing. That's just
And
horrific.
it's not their fault. The systems are not in place. Like, think about it. It's really on us to a degree as consumers. Like, the power we have is in what we spend our money on.
And what
And
we demand, really, right?
exactly. And if we're not going to eat the whole animal, if you go to your butcher and you're not eating the organ meats, why would your butcher then carry it? They're
Yeah.
not going to carry things just for them to go bad and for them to lose money.
Yeah.
So
That's
if
true.
we want to see change, we have to invest in the things we want the change to
Be the
happen.
change. Yeah,
Yeah,
be
be
the
the
change,
change.
like, right? I have to ask you this now, since, you and I were all in on the ancestral eating way. And, but, when I studied nutrition, because I did the NTA program in 2016, and I remember getting a lot of resistance when I'd tell people that I was studying nutrition. People just automatically thought that I was vegan or vegetarian. Now,
Yeah.
I think the environment's a little bit different now. There's a more awareness around the healthful nature of animal products, I think, but not in all circles. I think there are still many people that are I would call them confused. I mean, not that I don't think there's a place for a vegetarian diet at times, depending on the person, but and what they're going through. But what do you say? Do you get a lot of pushback? Do you have a response to people saying, "Oh, organs? What are you talking about?"
Oh yeah. We get so much pushback. I mean, I'll try to cover a few of the things really fast. So, I mean, one is, of course, what you already said is that people think that eating vegan and vegetarian is healthier, and that's really in many ways propaganda, because the reality is if you take anyone in a standard American diet and you push them through to any specific like diet that has an elimination protocol to it, they're going to change. Their health is going to most likely increase. So if you took someone and who is standard American diet, eating all that fast food and eating all that, kind of junk food, and you push them towards being vegan, yeah, they're going to change. It's going to improve. But you could do the same the other way. You could push them towards carnivore. Same thing is going to happen. They're going to
Right.
improve. The question is which one's sustainable and which one's going to, last the best for you. And I find kind of somewhere in the middle, like an omnivore, works the best. But with Pluck specifically, we get like, well, aren't the organs that where the toxins are stored?
Mm.
Isn't that nasty? And I'm like, well, that's a misunderstanding as well, because when we talk about toxins, we're talking about filtration, we're talking about the liver and the kidneys. And if you think about it, if those organs were actually a sponge and just holding on to all the toxins, we would all be dead because we live in a toxic society. And so if you think about it that way, if the body was just designed to almost be like a air filter in your room where it just once it gets clogged, it stops working, then how would you replace your body? Like we're not, it doesn't make any sense. The body is so robust and it's designed to survive. So that liver, those kidneys are empowered to not store the toxins, but to convert the toxins to water soluble forms so they can then leave the body. And how do they leave the body? They leave it through sweat, through poop, through pee. That's how they leave the body. Now, if you have issues, chronic issues where you're not detoxifying or eliminating these toxins, then where they get stored is the fat. And that's why if you're someone who's incredibly obese, or not even incredibly, just obese, and you've been obese for a long time, then when
Yeah.
you go to lose that weight, you need to do it gradually. Because if you lose it too fast, you could unleash a lot of toxins into your system and make yourself very sick.
Oh, yes. Gosh, that's so true. I've heard people talk about that with their family members, and very, very sad. But wow, I mean, I can tell that, James, I could talk to you for another hour easy. I think we have a lot of ground to cover. And I know I want to be mindful of the time. And I just want to say thank you so much. Where can people find you if they want to try some pluck?
Yeah. So we are on Amazon and we're on our website, eatpluck.com. And then you can find us on socials at eatpluck. And then I'm at Chef James Berry with an A.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much. And for everyone else listening, I'll just say stay happy and stay healthy. And I'll see you on the next one.